Yes, it's true. My wife decided to leave our marriage for someone else. At first, I felt really angry and wanted to get back at her and the person she left me for. However, things didn't go as I thought they would. Let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Ethan. I'm just a regular guy who hasn't really stood out much, especially when it comes to looks. For a lot of my life, I've had trouble with being overweight, but something changed when I was in high school. I started playing football and it made a big difference. People even started calling me Chipper because I was so tough in the game. They joked that anyone I tackled in football would definitely know it. I'm pretty tall, about 6 feet 3 inches, and I weighed around 260 pounds, so playing football made sense for me. I wasn't the star player or anything, but I was pretty strong, especially my upper body strength was noticeable. This helped me a lot in pushing away the other team's defenders. Playing football during high school was really good for me in several ways. For one, it helped me lose a lot of the extra weight that had been bothering me for most of my life. Even though I still had a bit of a belly, the muscles I built made me feel better about it. But having been overweight for so long, I still saw myself as the fat kid. This view of myself was made worse by all the teasing I went through in elementary and middle school because of my weight. But once I got to high school and joined the football team, things started to look up. I wasn't made fun of anymore. Plus, being part of the team came with its perks, like not being ignored by the girls anymore. To put it simply, I wasn't the kind of guy who caught the attention of cheerleaders, but there were a few girls who seemed interested in going out with me. Even so, I didn't really date much until my last year of high school when I met Jenna. Jenna Brooks had moved to our school toward the end of the previous school year, so I only started to notice her during our final year. Jenna had a face that was incredibly beautiful, the kind you don't forget. But Jenna was also overweight, which unfortunately seemed to matter a lot to most of the boys in our class. I'm not proud to say it, but at first, I was influenced by that too and didn't show much interest in her. However, everything changed when we ended up as partners in our chemistry class. Chemistry was tough for me, but Jenna was really good at it. She was able to explain things in a way that made sense, and her help was crucial in keeping my grades up. Without her, I'm pretty sure my chances of going to college would have been in danger. As we worked together on chemistry problems, I got to see how kind and funny Jenna was. My respect and admiration for her grew the more I got to know her. It was during this time that I found out we had something in common. Jenna had missed some school because she needed surgery for a heart condition she was born with. As for me, I started school a year late because I was born at the end of the year, and my parents decided to wait. So, both of us were 19 years old in our senior year. Gathering all my courage, I decided to ask Jenna out on a date. I could tell she was a bit hesitant at first, and I understood why. If I thought I had a hard time in school, Jenna had it much worse. She had been the victim of cruel jokes and mean teasing for a long time. Despite her initial doubts, she eventually said yes to going out with me. I planned a simple date. We would go to see a movie and then have some ice cream afterwards. The hike we went on was really nice, but because I'm a shy person, I couldn't find the bravery inside me to give her a kiss. Instead, what I did was shake her hand when we said goodbye, and I asked her if it would be okay for me to call her later. She seemed really happy about that. As time went on, Jen and I started seeing each other more and more. We went on quite a few dates together. By the time we got to our third date, I had gathered enough courage to give Jenna a small kiss on her cheek. After that, our relationship started to become a bit more romantic. We shared a sweet kiss on the neck, and with each date we had, it felt like we were getting closer. I started to really care about Jenna a lot. Meanwhile, something exciting was happening with the football team at my high school, which is called Fork High. We've never really been known for being great at football. However, this season was turning out to be surprisingly good for us. It almost felt like luck was on our side. Our team was led by an amazing quarterback named Derek Marshall. We also had the Parker twins, Shane and Alex, who were incredible at running with the ball. I played as the left defender, which meant it was my job to protect Derek from anyone trying to tackle him from his left side. I did my best to keep Derek safe, and it worked out pretty well. Even though we lost our first game against Mohawk High School by a score of 21-17, we could tell we had a strong team. Mohawk High School has always been really good at football, so playing against them was tough. But after losing that game, our team won the next 7 games in a row, which was amazing. We made it all the way to the state championship finals. Unfortunately, we didn't win the final game against Townsend School. They beat us 28-14. But getting to the finals was a big deal for us, and we were really proud of ourselves. Beating Mohawk High School in the semifinals with a score of 38-7 was a highlight of the season for us. It felt really good to win that game. I don't often get the chance to talk about the good old days of high school football, so I hope you'll forgive me for indulging in these memories. Sharing this story feels nice. As for Jenna and me, our relationship kept growing stronger. We even moved to what you might call second base in our relationship. As the time for the prom was getting closer, I quickly asked Jenna if she would go with me as my date. She was really happy about it and said yes with a big kiss. A few weeks before our graduation, Jenna decided she wanted to lose some weight to fit into a special dress she had picked out for prom. She worked really hard and ended up losing almost 20 kilograms. When the night of the prom arrived and I went to pick her up, I was amazed at how beautiful she looked. Some people might have thought she was overweight, but to me, she was absolutely beautiful. That night, she was wearing a light blue dress that really showed off her figure, especially her cleavage, which I found very attractive. The whole evening felt like a dream. We danced the night away, enjoying being together. After the prom was over, I suggested we find somewhere quiet where we could spend some more time alone. But Jenna had a different idea. She knew of a place, a hunting lodge owned by her uncle, about 30 miles outside the city. She had arranged for us to use it. The lodge was small and cozy, creating a private and intimate setting for us. It had just a few rooms, a small kitchen, a living area with a sofa and TV, a bedroom, and a bathroom. We started our evening on the sofa, joking around and having fun. By the end of the night, I felt really happy with how everything went. Despite staying out late, I made sure Jenna got back to her place 15 minutes before her 2 a.m. curfew. Throughout the rest of our time in school, Jenna and I were inseparable. We were intimate when we could be, but we were always careful. After we graduated from high school, I got a scholarship to play football in college, where I decided to study computer science. Jenna chose to study psychology. As the time came for us to go off to college, we started thinking about what would happen to our relationship. After talking it over, we both agreed that it would be best for us to break up. When I made the choice to go to college and leave Jenna behind, I realized it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. The pain of leaving her was almost too much to bear, and as I started my journey to Mountain Ridge University, I felt an incredible sadness. I was so upset that I thought about giving up and going back home. But deep down, I knew I couldn't walk away from the commitment I had made to my education. I had a strong desire to learn and improve myself, and this kept me going despite the emotional struggle. To help deal with the pain of our separation and the fear of losing Jenna forever, I threw myself into my new life at university. Jenna tried to comfort me before I left, saying that if our relationship was truly meant to be, it would survive this test. Once I got to Mountain Ridge University, I decided the best way to cope was to dive headfirst into my studies and football training. I spent every waking moment focused on my goals. From the time I got up in the morning until I went to bed at night, my hard work didn't go unnoticed. Both my coaches and professors started to see how dedicated I was. Even though my coaches suggested I might want to lighten my load, I chose to push myself to the limit. I trained hard as a college football player, which helped me lose any extra weight I had and build muscle. The intense workouts not only strengthened my upper body, but also made my legs stronger. Paying for college was a struggle since I only had a partial scholarship, and my parents had to cover the rest of the costs. It was a lot for them, and because I was so busy with football, I couldn't help them financially. Since I couldn't afford to go home, I relied on phone calls from Jenna to stay connected. It was clear she was finding our breakup just as hard as I was. Despite the challenges, my first year of college ended with a lot of success. I did well in my classes and on the football field. By the third game of the season, I had made it into the starting lineup, which was a big achievement for me. Even though I wasn't quick enough to be a fullback in football, my coaches saw that I could be really useful in another position. So, they moved me to play as the left guard. In this position, my job was to use my strength to block the other team's players and make space for our running backs to get through. My hard work in this new role helped our team end the season with a great record of 8 wins and just 2 losses. On top of that, I did really well in my classes, good enough to make it onto the dean's list, which made my parents very proud. During the summer break, Jenna and I got back together and picked up right where we left off. I felt like I was truly in love with her. Although looking back, I sometimes wonder if it was real love or just a strong attraction. But after thinking about it a lot, I've come to believe that it was indeed love, at least from my side, because I still care about her deeply. That summer, I also focused a lot on my studies, taking 3 online courses because I wanted to finish college faster. Jenna and I also became close again in a more personal way, taking the time to really know each other physically. After I graduated from college in just 3 years, Jenna and I got married quickly. We both found jobs at a company called Tri-Orbit Electronics in Virginia, which works on software and electronics. I worked on developing software, while Jenna used her skills in managing human resources. A few years into our jobs, we had saved enough money to buy a small house. This achievement made us start thinking about having kids. For the first 3.5 years, our marriage was going well, but there was one thing that we were both concerned about. We had both gained a lot of weight. Jenna's weight went up to 230 pounds, and I got up to 310 pounds. My height helped me carry the extra weight a bit better than Jenna did, but neither of us was happy about being overweight. We found it hard to stick to any diets, but despite this, my love for Jenna didn't change because of her size. After 3 years of being married and not having any children, we decided it was time to talk to our family doctor for advice. Our family doctor ran a bunch of tests on us and found that we were both healthy, but he suggested that losing some weight could help improve Jenna's chances of getting pregnant. This advice led us to start a strict diet, something neither of us had ever done before. 6 months into this new lifestyle, Jenna had impressively lost 50 pounds, while I had only managed to shed 25 pounds. I have to be honest, I wasn't as committed to the diet as Jenna was, which definitely slowed down my progress. Jenna's weight loss didn't just change how she looked, it also changed how others saw her. She started getting a lot of attention from men, something that was new for both of us. Motivated by her success, Jenna also began working out at the gym 5 times a week. Seeing her dedication and her transformation, I knew I had to get more serious. So I fully embraced our diet and started going to the gym regularly with her. By the end of that year, Jenna had lost a total of 80 pounds, and I had lost 90 pounds. We were both really proud of what we had accomplished. However, I didn't realize at the time that our journey to lose weight would eventually lead to some unexpected and painful outcomes. As Jenna continued to lose weight, she began wearing clothes that were more revealing than before. At first, I was excited and proud of her newfound confidence. But then, things at work started to make me uncomfortable. Jenna, who had once been overlooked for her appearance, had become incredibly attractive, and this change brought new challenges. One of these challenges arose when Derek Marshall, a higher up at our company, was promoted to head of human resources, making him Jenna's boss. I was just a senior programmer, a couple of ranks below Derek in the company's hierarchy, which made the situation even more complex. I didn't worry too much initially since Derek was married to Hannah Sterling, a woman who had been popular in her youth and was still quite beautiful. But things took a turn at the company's Christmas party. Jenna suggested I dance with Hannah while she danced with Derek, her boss. This arrangement made me feel uneasy, especially given the changes in Jenna's appearance and the new dynamics at work. While I was dancing with Hannah, I found myself enjoying being close to her, which wasn't surprising to me. Being a young man in my 20s, it's natural to be drawn to attractive women. However, what caught me off guard was how down-to-earth and friendly Hannah was, unlike what I had expected. When Derek and I joined the party, Hannah couldn't stop praising how great Jenna and I looked. She mentioned that Jenna had always been beautiful, but now she looked absolutely stunning, and jokingly advised me to keep a close watch on her. I thanked her, feeling a bit shy, and complimented them in return, noting how Derek seemed unchanged from our high school days, and how great Hannah looked herself. Hannah appreciated the compliments, and as the dance ended, she mentioned that my 4th wedding anniversary with Jenna was coming up soon. Around this time, Jenna told me she wanted to start taking birth control pills again, which made me concerned about our plans to start a family. When I brought up the topic, Jenna bluntly stated she didn't want children at the moment, which upset me. I couldn't believe she made such a decision without considering our mutual plans. Jenna tried to reassure me, explaining she just wanted to enjoy her new figure for a bit longer before having children. I didn't realize then that there was a deeper issue at play. I had no idea that Derek was pursuing Jenna with a lot of determination. Jenna, flattered by the attention from someone who used to be the football team captain in our school, eventually gave in to his advances. This suspicion of mine grew as Jenna started to work late often and claimed she was going out with her girlfriends. Even though I was new to dealing with such situations, I wasn't naive. Jenna's late nights made me suspicious, and though I didn't want to believe she could be unfaithful, the signs were too obvious to ignore. So I hired a private detective firm to look into it. In just a week, they provided solid proof of Jenna's affair with Derek. They had video evidence of them being intimate at their workplace, photos of them being affectionate during lunch dates, and even a video of Derek visiting our house while I was at work. Most shockingly, they captured them in an intimate moment in our living room, clearly visible from the front window. The pain I felt discovering Jenna's affair was beyond words. Not only did she break our marriage vows, but she also chose to do so with someone I considered a friend. While Derek and I weren't very close, I still saw him as a friend, which made the betrayal even more painful. Finding out about Jenna's affair was like a shock I could never have anticipated. Even with the heartache it brought, I held on to a small hope that once I confronted Jenna with what I had learned, she might realize her mistake. My love for her was deep, and I truly believed she still had feelings for me. So, after we had dinner together, I prepared myself for one of the toughest conversations I would ever have to have. Jenna looked at me, sensing something was up, and took a seat at the kitchen table, ready to listen. As soon as I showed her the proof of her affair, her face went pale, and she began to cry, running off into the bathroom in distress. I knocked on the bathroom door, trying to get her to come out and talk, but she wouldn't. I waited for her, feeling a mix of anger and sadness, and poured myself a glass of rum to try to calm my nerves. Eventually, Jenna came back to the table, looking defeated. I asked her bluntly what she had to say for herself. Her voice was so quiet, I could barely hear her, as she said she never wanted any of this to happen. I couldn't help but respond sarcastically, suggesting that her clothes just magically came off by themselves. Jenna got defensive, arguing that if I had paid more attention to her, she might not have ended up in this situation. This made me wonder for a moment if I had neglected her, but then my anger surged back. I refused to let her shift the blame onto me for her decision to have an affair. I pressed her for an explanation, but she remained silent, leaving me frustrated and angry. I demanded to know what she wanted to do next, if she wanted to stay with me or leave me for Derek. Jenna's tears didn't stop as she struggled with her emotions. I told her she needed to make a choice by the next day, and if she chose me, she'd have to quit her job and cut all ties with Derek, and we'd have to go to counseling. Unable to deal with my disappointment and anger, I packed up all her belongings and told her she'd have to stay in the guest room until she made up her mind. The next day, I came home early from work, anxious and upset, barely able to keep my breakfast down. Jenna came home looking just as anxious as I felt. We sat down at the kitchen table again, and I asked her if she had made her decision. Through her tears, Jenna told me she loved me but couldn't let go of Derek. Hearing her say that was incredibly painful. It was clear she had made her choice. Jenna's silent nod in response to my realization felt like the deepest betrayal. My thoughts were racing, trying to process the end of our relationship and the pain of her decision. I was caught between a strong urge to confront Jenna and Derek for their actions and a deep sadness that made me want to just cry in solitude. I questioned Jenna, asking if she realized the impact of her choices, especially on a child who would grow up without a father being present. Jenna looked both angry and a bit ashamed as she told me that Derek had been planning to leave his wife even before she and Derek became involved. I couldn't help but challenge her, asking how she could so easily consider ending our nearly 4-year marriage. I was filled with not just anger, but also sorrow, barely able to stop myself from crying or lashing out. For a moment, I even thought about confronting Jenna more aggressively and then going to see Derek in person. Jenna tried to apologize, saying she never intended to hurt me and that she had realized she was deeply in love with Derek, who felt the same way about her. I felt a rush of anger and wanted to react, but I knew I had to stay calm. It was a struggle, but I managed to keep my emotions in check, understanding that getting angry or violent wouldn't solve anything or lessen the pain. I refused to let Jenna see just how deeply she had hurt me. Begging her to stay was out of the question. It would only show weakness, which I wanted to avoid at all costs. So I told her calmly that if she wanted a divorce, I would agree to it. Her reaction was a mix of confusion and maybe a bit of surprise. Perhaps she had expected me to fight for her, but I knew that if she had decided to leave, there was nothing I could do to change her mind. The next day, I took steps to separate our finances. I went to the bank to discuss the situation with our financial advisor and withdrew half the money from our joint accounts. I then opened new accounts in my name only and canceled all our shared credit cards, ordering new ones for myself. I also decided to sell our house and consulted a realtor to put it on the market. With a heavy heart, I contacted a divorce lawyer and arranged for Jenna to be served with the divorce papers at her workplace, citing adultery as the reason for our separation. Our divorce process was relatively straightforward, thanks to our short marriage and the fact that we didn't have children. We split our assets evenly and went our separate ways. Derek's divorce, on the other hand, was much messier. He had a young child and a wife who hadn't worked, which meant he had to pay significant alimony for both his child and ex-wife. Derek tried to save money by hiring a less expensive lawyer, which backfired, resulting in him having to pay alimony for an extended period of 15 years. Despite his unhappiness with the situation, Derek signed the divorce papers just 2 months after Jenna and I finalized ours. To my surprise, Derek and Jenna decided to get married shortly after their divorces were complete. After hearing the news of Jenna and Derek's marriage, I couldn't help but feel a mix of bitterness and resentment. In the first week following our separation, I was adrift, unsure of how to handle my emotions. Since I don't drink, turning to alcohol to numb my pain wasn't an option for me. Instead, I found myself consumed with thoughts of revenge against Jenna and Derek, a reaction I believe many people might have when they feel betrayed. I went online, searching for stories of how others had gotten back at their exes, diving into a dark place mentally. My quest for vengeance led me to purchase a firearm, a decision that alarmed me when I reflected on it. As I read more about revenge, I realized my initial ideas were driven by anger and could lead to actions I'd later regret. I thought about damaging their property as a form of payback. Ideas like slashing their tires, putting sugar in their gas tank, or causing a flood in their house crossed my mind. But the more I read about such acts of revenge, the more I saw how pointless they were. None of these actions would actually make me feel better or heal the hurt from Jenna's betrayal. Feeling lost, I turned to a local church for guidance. A conversation with the pastor there gave me a new perspective. He explained that seeking revenge wouldn't help me overcome the pain of being betrayed by my wife. Hurting Jenna or Derek wouldn't heal my wounds. The pastor's advice was simple but profound. Healing would only come with time and distance from the situation. Although I was initially doubtful, I began to see the wisdom in his words. Being near Jenna, but not being with her, only reopened my wounds every time I saw her. I understood that seeking revenge would not ease my pain. So, I decided to follow the pastor's advice and put some distance between Jenna and myself. An opportunity for a fresh start presented itself when rumors about my company's financial difficulties began to circulate. We had recently secured a contract with the Ministry of Defense, a project that promised significant profits. However, the task was daunting. We were to develop a new software and electronic system exclusively for the Air Force's fighters and bombers. The project was highly classified and of national importance, promising to advance the United States' capabilities significantly. The project was behind schedule and over budget, raising concerns about the company's financial stability. Government contracts usually came with steady payments, but this one was different. No payments would be made until the development was completed, and any delays would result in hefty fines. The potential for financial ruin was real if we failed to meet our obligations. As one of the senior software developers, I was involved in discussions about how to avert the crisis. The rest of the design team was hesitant to engage with this high-stakes project, leaving me to contemplate our next steps amidst my personal turmoil. Many of my colleagues at work were updating their resumes and starting to look for other jobs, fearing the repercussions of failing the big project we had taken on. They warned me that failing could mean not just losing my job, but potentially causing the company to collapse, which would be a stain on my professional reputation for years to come. At that point in my life, after going through a divorce and feeling like I had little left to lose, I thought to myself, why not take the risk? My lifestyle had become simple, and the idea of losing my job wasn't as daunting as it might have been before. Then I got the news that Jenna was pregnant, which felt like a sharp pain in my heart. I had always hoped that Jenna and I would have children together someday. But as I looked more into the details of the Air Force project, it seemed clear that the original plan was headed for failure. Despite the odds, I decided to accept the challenge and move to California, putting a significant distance between myself and my former life with Jenna. Just like in my first year of college, I immersed myself completely in my work, sometimes working up to 20 hours a day. This left me no time to dwell on my past with Jenna. I made the difficult choice to let go of 3/4 of the original programming team and all the engineers working on the electronics. I then put together a new team, scrapping all the previous work that had been done. Despite our tight schedule and my limited knowledge in engineering, I managed to find talented engineers both within and outside the company to join us. They were initially doubtful of my plans, but their skepticism turned to enthusiasm once I explained my simple yet effective approach to the electronic components we needed. Our main focus then shifted to making sure the software worked perfectly. Through hard work and determination, we developed a program that met our high standards. With just 3 weeks to go before we were scheduled to deliver our product to the military, I felt confident in what we had achieved. Our initial tests, which involved integrating the software with the electronic components, were successful 96% of the time. The remaining 4% of issues seemed like they would be easy to fix. Once word got out about the success of our program, the company's stock value soared, increasing by more than 300 points in just a few months. This project not only distanced me from my past with Jenna, but also marked a new chapter of success in my professional life. Following our success with the Air Force project, there was exciting news that the Ministry of Defense wanted to extend our contract to include services for the Navy, Army, and Marines. This expansion meant we were looking at potentially earning billions in profits. However, the opportunity didn't stop there. I discovered that with a few modifications, our program could also be adapted for civilian use. By removing any sensitive or classified information, we transformed it into a versatile platform suitable for various commercial applications. The potential for this adapted program was vast, opening up numerous possibilities for its application in the civilian sector. This achievement led to my promotion to Senior Vice President, with the added responsibility of overseeing the development of these commercial uses. Over the next few years, my role required me to make regular trips back to our headquarters in Virginia. Despite the possibility of running into Derek or Jenna during these visits, I never did, and frankly, I was indifferent to the prospect. I had moved past our history together, taking to heart the advice of the pastor who counseled me on the importance of time and distance for healing. On one of these trips, I had an unexpected encounter with Kelly Parker, a cheerleader from Calverton High School and a close friend of Susie. Kelly had married Alex Parker and started a family long before I had met Jenna. I'd always harbored feelings for Kelly. She was not only the most beautiful cheerleader, but also had a warmth and friendliness that made her incredibly popular in school. Despite the years, Kelly remained stunningly attractive, a stark contrast to Jenna. While Jenna was known for her short blonde curls and prominent figure, Kelly was petite, with long, dark hair, standing just under 5 feet 3 inches tall, and had a more modest physique. Yet both shared a smile that conveyed genuine kindness. I was taken aback when Kelly recognized me in the grocery store. I was there picking up essentials in preparation for a board presentation scheduled for the following week. Official board meetings meant I would be staying in town for a week, but fortunately, the company provided furnished apartments for executives from other regions like myself. This encounter with Kelly, occurring so unexpectedly, brought a new and surprising element to my visit. In the furnished apartments provided by my company, I always found the kitchen to be quite bare, lacking any real food to cook. It was in this moment, as I pondered over which frozen dinners to choose from the grocery store freezer, that I heard a familiar voice call out my name. "Randy, is that really you?" I turned around to see Sophie, her voice snapping me back to the present. My face warmed up as she called out to me again, and I realized that my old feelings for her hadn't completely disappeared. Sophie had aged gracefully, with a few strands of gray in her hair and some lines on her face that only added to her charm. She greeted me with a sincere smile, and I responded, "Sophie!" surprised and flattered that she remembered me. She placed her shopping basket next to mine and admitted she wouldn't have recognized me if it weren't for Hannah mentioning she had seen me while dining with her. I was taken aback to learn that Sophie knew where I worked, puzzled by how our paths hadn't crossed sooner. "Do you work at TriOrbit?" I asked, genuinely surprised to learn she was employed at the same company. Sophie confirmed with a smile that she had been working in the marketing department for about 6 years. This revelation surprised me, and I felt a bit guilty for not being aware of her presence at our workplace. However, I reasoned that since I had minimal interaction with the marketing team, it was understandable that we hadn't met. Despite this, I couldn't help feeling that I should have been more aware of her. Wanting to shift the conversation to a more comfortable topic, I gathered the courage to ask how she was doing. Her answer carried a touch of sadness. "I'm doing as well as could be expected. Unfortunately, I'm now divorced." She explained that Alex had been unfaithful, not only with his secretary, but with several other women, one of whom became pregnant. Sophie had felt she had no choice but to end their marriage, although she believed Alex got off too lightly for his actions. Since they had similar incomes and no significant assets, there was no alimony, only child support, which turned into a constant battle. Sophie expressed her frustration not just with the financial struggles, but with Alex's neglect of their son, Eli, which upset her the most. The moment Sophie shared her struggles with me, I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger on her behalf. I immediately offered my apologies, regretting the situation she found herself in. Even though I knew Alex to be a bit wild, I had hoped marriage would change him. As I looked into Sophie's eyes, which had a captivating shade of green, I found myself at a loss for words. Instead of trying to say something, I chose to simply show her my empathy. I also shared a bit about my own life, mentioning that my marriage to Jenna had ended. Jenna had been pursued by Derek, not Shane, as I corrected myself, remembering the details Hannah had shared with me. I acknowledged that in such situations, it usually involves decisions from both parties involved. When Sophie noticed the frozen dinners in my shopping cart, she teased me about my choice of meal. Admitting to my lack of cooking skills, I agreed with her observation. That's when Sophie offered to have me over for a homemade meal. She assured me it wouldn't be anything fancy, but it would definitely be better than frozen dinners. Initially hesitant, the thought of a home-cooked meal was too good to pass up, so I accepted her invitation, emphasizing how long it had been since I'd enjoyed such a luxury. Dinner at Sophie's was a wonderful experience. She made a simple yet delicious meal of potatoes, string beans, ribs, and sorbet for dessert. It was refreshing to have someone to talk with, especially in the company of her son, Ely. Ely was a friendly and outgoing boy who, to my pleasure, shared my enthusiasm for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We spent a good part of the evening talking about our favorite football team and looking forward to the next season. I mentioned that I had 4 season tickets right at the 50-yard line, courtesy of my company. These were intended for entertaining clients, but when I didn't have clients to take, I'd invite friends or sometimes go alone, offering the extra tickets to fans looking for seats. During our conversation, Eli mentioned how much he'd love to go to a game someday. Without thinking, I impulsively invited him to join me for a game. The words were out before I could consider if I was overstepping, given our just rekindled acquaintance. In an effort to smooth over the moment after my spontaneous invitation to Ely to join me for a Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, I quickly added that such a plan would need his mom's approval. Eli looked at his mom with hopeful eyes, and she simply said, "We'll discuss it," leaving the decision open for later. As the evening wound down, I took a moment to apologize for my hasty invitation, explaining that I hadn't fully thought through the offer of taking them to a game before speaking out loud. I explained to Sophie and Eli that I had 4 season tickets to all the Buccaneers home games and a lot of frequent flyer miles, emphasizing how happy it would make me if they could join me for a game. My words were earnest, but I could see in Sophie's reaction that I might have overstepped again in my eagerness to make amends. Trying to backtrack, I ended up complicating things further by suggesting that Sophie and Eli could stay in a separate room from me if they accepted my invitation, my nervousness making me stumble over my words. Despite my awkward attempt at clarification, Sophie responded with a kind smile, calling me the sweetest, which eased my worry about having possibly offended her. Feeling a bit braver, I then asked Sophie if she would be open to going out with me the next time I was in town, adding that I understood if she was seeing someone else. My main goal was simply to have someone to talk to. Sophie's response was heartening. She reminisced about our high school days and shared that she'd always found me nice and now realized she'd be happy to spend more time with me. She even looked forward to attending Buccaneers games with Eli and me in the coming year. Every time I returned to Virginia, I made sure to call Sophie, and we always made plans to meet up. Sometimes I found reasons to visit the East Coast even when it wasn't necessary, just to see her. Initially, our relationship was purely platonic. We were just two friends enjoying each other's company. That season, I took Sophie and Eli to a crucial Buccaneers game, which they had to win to make it to the playoffs. The victory thrilled Eli. After Eli went to sleep that night, Sophie came to my room, and suddenly, our relationship evolved into something more. Her visit marked a turning point, indicating that our friendship was blossoming into a deeper connection. I was totally surprised when I heard a knock at my door, especially since I was deeply focused on a replay of the Buccaneers game on TV, analyzing every play. Immediately concerned that there might be something wrong, particularly with Eli, I asked Sophie if everything was okay. "Is Eli all right?" were my exact words, filled with worry. Sophie reassured me with a smile, saying, "Yes, everything's fine. Eli's asleep, dreaming about his team making it to the playoffs. I just thought we could share a drink and talk." Glancing down and realizing I was only in my boxer briefs and a t-shirt, I felt a sudden need to dress more appropriately. "I'm going to find my trousers," I told her, excusing myself to look for them. I remembered leaving them on a chair in the corner, but they were mysteriously absent. A wave of panic hit me as I frantically searched for my trousers, but they seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Despite my thorough search, all I found was Sophie trying to hold back her laughter at my predicament. My embarrassment was palpable, my cheeks turning a deep shade of red. Sophie, sensing how uneasy I felt, came up with a playful suggestion to ease the tension. "If it makes you feel more comfortable, we can both stay in our underwear," she said with a teasing smile, proceeding to remove her skirt. Now we both stood there in our underwear. To ease the awkwardness, I decided to fix us some drinks. I grabbed 2 small bottles of rum and a couple of cans of cola from the minibar. Even though I'm not much of a drinker, I do enjoy a rum and coke occasionally. As I prepared our drinks, Sophie took a seat on my bed, crossing her legs gracefully. Handing her the drink, I then looked for a spot to sit myself, feeling a bit out of place. Sophie caught my hesitant glance and, understanding my hesitation, tapped the bed gently, signaling me to sit beside her. "Come on, sit here. Don't worry, I won't bite," she said with a reassuring smile, causing me to blush even more. I took a seat next to her, taking a long sip of my drink, which helped me relax a bit as we continued our conversation. After we finished our drinks, I offered to make another round, but Sophie declined. Expecting her to leave and return to her room, I was taken aback when she stayed. Not sure what to do next, I just cleared our glasses and sat back down. Then, unexpectedly, Sophie leaned in and kissed me quickly but gently on the lips, sending a jolt of surprise through me. Smiling, she said, "I've been hoping you'd kiss me for months," revealing her long-held feelings in that simple gesture. Sophie seemed to understand me better than I understood myself. She could tell that I still viewed her through the lens of her high school cheerleader days as someone out of my reach, but she was quick to let me know that she wasn't the same person she had been back then. It was true. There were so many times I had wanted to kiss her, but I held back because I was worried it might ruin the friendship we had built. Despite my fears, in a moment of boldness, I leaned in and kissed her with all the passion I felt. Her kiss was sweeter than I could have imagined. After that kiss, I couldn't stop myself from telling her how much I admired her, not just for her beauty, but for all the wonderful traits she possessed. Sophie then rested her head against my chest, creating a moment of intimacy that was more profound than any I had experienced before, even more so than my first time with Jenna. Fast forward 6 months, Sophie and I were engaged, much to the delight of Eli, who was thrilled at the prospect of me becoming his stepfather. A year after that unforgettable night, Sophie and I were married. Unfortunately, Sophie's ex-husband Alex lived up to the warnings she had given me about him. He barely acknowledged his son and seemed to hold a grudge against me for stepping into their lives. Alex kept in touch with Derek and made it a point to talk about how happy Derek and Jenna were whenever he visited, presumably trying to make me jealous. Despite his attempts, I just listened without reaction, but I couldn't help learning some details from his stories. Derek was still managing the human resources department, and Jenna had chosen to quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom, and they now had 3 children. This news surprised me but didn't stir up any negative feelings. There was also a time I overheard Sophie arguing with Alex over the phone about not sending child support. I suggested maybe letting it go, offering to help support Eli financially myself. Sophie quickly shut down that idea, insisting that Alex should not be let off the hook for his responsibilities. "This money is rightfully Eli's," she stated with conviction. Her firm tone made me step back and respect her wishes. As December rolled around, I received exciting news about my career. I was going to be promoted to executive vice president of the company. The announcement was scheduled to be made at the Christmas party, set to be held at the Grand Washington Convention Center, with an anticipated attendance of 400 to 500 people. This was a significant milestone in my career, and I looked forward to celebrating it with Sophie, Eli, and the rest of our loved ones. Feeling a bit self-conscious about the big recognition I was about to receive at the upcoming event, I couldn't help but feel a tad embarrassed. However, Sophie was over the moon with excitement for my achievement, playfully chiding me whenever I tried to downplay it. She insisted that I deserved all the recognition, sharing that many people in the company had told her about my contributions, and even mentioned that I was being considered for the CEO position when Roger, the current CEO, steps down next year. Reflecting on Sophie's words, I responded with a sense of indifference, joking that nothing really mattered as long as I had her, the most wonderful woman in the world, by my side. With a twinkle in her eye, Sophie teased me about a funny moment we had shared in Kansas City involving a mishap with a condom. As I chuckled, remembering the incident, she smiled even wider and shared the incredible news that she was pregnant. At that moment, I knew more than ever that I never wanted to be apart from her. As we embraced, the excitement of our future together filled me, even though I was a bit anxious about attending the party that evening. Parties had become somewhat routine and less appealing to me over the years, but Sophie still loved them, especially when we went together. Her vibrant personality always seemed to light up the room. During the party, after dancing a few times, we were making our way back to our table when we unexpectedly ran into Derek and Jenna, who had arrived late along with Alex and his new girlfriend, Emma. Seeing them, I was taken aback by how much Jenna had changed and noticed Derek trying to conceal a growing belly. Alex looked fit, but I figured he was still on the prowl for more conquests. My thoughts were interrupted when the CEO of TriOrbit, Roger Clayton, made an announcement over the PA system. He mentioned that the company had been searching for a new executive vice president to replace Charlie Bruner, who had recently retired. It was clear to me then who he had in mind for the position. The decision-making process for the new executive vice president position took the board of directors quite some time, filled with interviews and deliberations over several months. In the end, they reached the same conclusion I had anticipated. I was thrilled when the announcement was made that I, Ethan Lipson, would be the new executive vice president in recognition of my dedication and significant contributions to the company. The moment my name was announced, the spotlight shone on me, and the crowd erupted into applause. Sophie, overcome with happiness, pulled me into a passionate embrace and kissed me, sharing in the joy of my accomplishment. As the celebration continued and the atmosphere of the party settled back into its usual rhythm, I found myself unsure of how to react to Jenna, Derek, Alex, and his partner's presence. Alex seemed angry. Derek appeared jealous, but it was Jenna's expression, filled with sadness and a sense of loss, that caught my attention the most. I felt a bit lost in the moment, but Sophie, ever the gracious one, approached Derek, Jenna, and Alex with warmth, hugging each of them in turn. She then extended her hand to Emma, welcoming her kindly. Inspired by Sophie's graciousness, I followed her lead, shaking hands with Derek, Alex, and Emma, and even shared a playful moment with Jenna. Then, as music filled the room, Sophie made a surprising suggestion. She proposed that I dance with Jenna while she danced with her ex-husband Alex, and invited Emma and Derek to join us as well. I was taken aback by her suggestion, but trusted her judgment. Dancing with Jenna, I tried to make small talk, asking about her and Derek's situation. She shared with a hint of resignation that their marriage was not going well and hinted at a possible divorce due to Derek's infidelity. I expressed my sympathy for her situation, to which she responded with a mix of skepticism and curiosity, questioning the sincerity of my condolences. Her doubt took me by surprise, and I reassured her that I genuinely felt sorry for her predicament, emphasizing that I would never wish such misfortune on her as a lesson. My intention was to convey genuine concern, hoping to bridge the awkwardness of our past with a moment of understanding and compassion on the dance floor. At first, I was taken aback by Jenna's words, but then I remembered there was a time when I might have actually said something like that to her. Honestly, right after we split, if she'd come to me, I might have been bitter enough to say something harsh. However, I never truly hated her. She was my first love, and the pain of losing her was profound. As time passed, I've moved on, embracing life's journey. Then, as the music suddenly stopped, I saw tears streaming down Jenna's face. I felt a deep sense of regret, realizing that by ending things with her, I might have made a significant mistake, one that now seemed impossible to rectify. Seeing Jenna so upset, I felt a mix of pity and sadness for her. Right then, Sophie took my hand, bringing me back to the present, and I kissed her, grateful for her presence in my life. I asked her how her time with Alex went, and with a smile, she told me he hadn't changed much, still acting like the person we both knew him to be. He even tried to convince her to come back to him, claiming he was ready to settle down. Sophie just laughed it off, questioning why she would ever consider going back to him when she had someone much better in her life now. I watched Cindy return to our table, her tears visible even from a distance. Meanwhile, Kirk and Jason appeared to be in a deep discussion, possibly about Jason's date. This situation reminded me of the pain I felt when Cindy and I parted ways, a type of hurt that doesn't easily fade but leaves a lasting mark. Back then, my thoughts were consumed with getting revenge. However, the pastor's advice proved true. Revenge didn't ease the pain. In the end, it was time and creating distance from the situation that helped me heal. Contrary to thinking about taking revenge, I realized that living well was the best response. I found happiness and love, while Cindy ended up facing her own challenges after her divorce from Kirk, left to care for 3 children on her own. It wasn't about seeking revenge, life just unfolded that way, showing that actions have consequences. After a long drive, I arrived at the Marriott Hotel in Baltimore, planning to surprise Kelly, who was attending a conference there. I wanted to take her out for a nice dinner. Unbeknownst to me, for the last 3 months, Kelly had been suspecting an affair with one of her colleagues. Every time she left for a business trip, training, or conference, I couldn't help but feel uneasy, wondering if there was more to her trips than just work. Tonight was the night I planned to catch my wife Megan if she was up to something fishy. We've been married happily for 14 years and have 2 lovely kids, Sarah, 12, and Todd, 10, who are having a blast at their grandma's house right now. Megan and I started our journey together right after we graduated, tying the knot after being a couple for the last 2 years of school. Our marriage felt like the most natural thing in the world. Megan's always had this amazing vibe, lighting up every room with her long, beautiful brown hair and slender figure. She had these striking features and not an extra ounce of weight on her. But things changed 3 months ago, casting a shadow over what once felt unbreakable. I noticed some subtle signs, but they were too vague to put my finger on. I didn't dare talk to her about my worries, fearing I'd sound paranoid or jealous. Since her conference was nearby today, I decided to pay her a surprise visit, hoping to catch her red-handed. I walked up to the counter, gripping a jacket in my hands, and introduced myself as Phil Jenkins. I said my wife Megan was attending an insurance conference and staying in room 214, asking for the key. After showing my ID, I got the key and headed to the elevator, feeling incredibly nervous. What would I say when I saw her? Would I knock or just walk in? Would she be alone? These questions raced through my mind as I walked down the hallway. Finally, I decided to use the key and quietly open the door, unsure of what awaited me. Inside, I found Megan sitting at the table, focused on some paperwork. Startled, she turned around, looking surprised to see me. "Gosh, Phil, you scared me," she exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" "Hey, dear," I replied. "I had some free time and thought I'd surprise you and take you out for dinner." Megan was thrilled and asked if I planned to stay the night. "Sure thing," I said. "I could use some company." She kissed me and asked if we could talk before going out. As she undressed for a shower, I felt relieved. My plan to catch her cheating had totally failed, but I didn't mind. We had the whole night ahead of us to enjoy each other's company. I watched Jenna return to our table, her tears visible even from a distance. Meanwhile, Derek and Alex appeared to be in a deep discussion, possibly about Alex's date. This situation reminded me of the pain I felt when Jenna and I parted ways, a type of hurt that doesn't easily fade but leaves a lasting mark. Back then, my thoughts were consumed with getting revenge. However, the pastor's advice proved true. Revenge didn't ease the pain. In the end, it was time and creating distance from the situation that helped me heal. Contrary to thinking about taking revenge, I realized that living well was the best response. I found happiness and love, while Jenna ended up facing her own challenges after her divorce from Derek, left to care for 3 children on her own. It wasn't about seeking revenge. Life just unfolded that way, showing that actions have consequences. After a long drive, I arrived at the Marriott Hotel in Baltimore, planning to surprise Sophie, who was attending a conference there. I wanted to take her out for a nice dinner. Unbeknownst to me, for the last 3 months, Sophie had been suspecting an affair with one of her colleagues. Every time she left for a business trip, training, or conference, I couldn't help but feel uneasy, wondering if there was more to her trips than just work. Tonight was the night I planned to catch my wife Olivia if she was up to something fishy. We've been married happily for 14 years and have 2 lovely kids, Sarah, 12, and Shane, 10, who are having a blast at their grandma's house right now. Olivia and I started our journey together right after we graduated, tying the knot after being a couple for the last 2 years of school. Our marriage felt like the most natural thing in the world. Olivia's always had this amazing vibe, lighting up every room with her long, beautiful brown hair and slender figure. She had these striking features, and not an extra ounce of weight on her. But things changed 3 months ago, casting a shadow over what once felt unbreakable. I noticed some subtle signs, but they were too vague to put my finger on. I didn't dare talk to her about my worries, fearing I'd sound paranoid or jealous. Since her conference was nearby today, I decided to pay her a surprise visit, hoping to catch her red-handed. I walked up to the counter, gripping a jacket in my hands, and introduced myself as Dan Roberts. I said my wife Olivia was attending an insurance conference and staying in room 214, asking for the key. After showing my ID, I got the key and headed to the elevator, feeling incredibly nervous. What would I say when I saw her? Would I knock or just walk in? Would she be alone? These questions raced through my mind as I walked down the hallway. Finally, I decided to use the key and quietly open the door, unsure of what awaited me. Inside, I found Olivia sitting at the table, focused on some paperwork. Startled, she turned around, looking surprised to see me. "Gosh, Dan, you scared me," she exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" "Hey, dear," I replied. "I had some free time and thought I'd surprise you and take you out for dinner." Olivia was thrilled and asked if I planned to stay the night. "Sure thing," I said. "I could use some company." She kissed me and asked if we could talk before going out. As she undressed for a shower, I felt relieved. My plan to catch her cheating had totally failed, but I didn't mind. We had the whole night ahead of us to enjoy each other's company. I really cared about this woman and didn't want to lose her at all. We shared a short, close moment together. She seemed really happy and said something that made it sound like this moment was a nice lead-up to dinner. After that, she smiled a lot, turned around, and went to the bathroom to get ready. I tried to calm down and sat on the edge of the bed, thinking. I remembered Olivia's travel bag was in the dresser. I was looking for some aspirin because I had a headache from traveling for so long. But when I looked in her bag for the pills, I couldn't find any. Instead, I found something unexpected in a small pocket of her suitcase. Carefully, I pulled out a box that had 6 contraceptives in it from a hidden part. I just sat there on the bed, holding them, and thinking hard. Ever since Shane was born, Olivia started taking birth control pills so we wouldn't have another baby. But those pills made her feel really sick every time she took one. We thought a lot about it and decided that I would have an operation called a vasectomy so we wouldn't have to worry about getting pregnant anymore. It felt good not to deal with the hassle of birth control anymore. But finding these contraceptives made me wonder why she had them now. I know I'm not a fool, and it hit me pretty fast that maybe my wife wasn't being faithful to me, and I didn't know what to do. I kept looking through her suitcase and found some safety pins she kept just in case her clothes needed fixing. Feeling upset, I did something without thinking much. I used one of the pins to poke holes in all the contraceptives. I put everything back how I found it, realizing she was still in the shower. To keep my mind off things, I picked up my phone and called a friend. "Hi, Tommy. It's Dan. I need a favor," I said. Tommy asked what I needed. I explained that I needed him to call me in about an hour and pretend that there was an emergency at school, like a pipe bursting, and they needed me right away. All he had to do was make that call, and I'd handle the rest. Tommy got the plan and agreed to help. "I understand. I'll call you around 7. Take care," he said. At that moment, I knew I didn't want to stay with my wife that night. I was already feeling bad about what happened, and I didn't want to make things even worse. On my way home, I knew I needed some time to think things through. Even though part of me wanted to confront Olivia right after she came out of the shower, I managed to hold back. I felt angry and hurt, thinking about what she might have done. But I didn't want to act in a harmful way. I've always taken pride in being a calm and controlled person, not someone who would hurt others easily. I also thought it would be smarter to keep what I knew about her possible cheating to myself for now. When we got to the restaurant, I felt really sad. Olivia tried to cheer me up by telling me I could pick anything from the menu because she would pay for it. But I wasn't really in the mood to eat much, so I just chose a small steak. Olivia suggested we have a bottle of pink wine with our meal, which sounded nice. After we ordered, I felt the need to ask her more about us. I asked Olivia if she was really happy with our life together. She said yes, talking about how nice our home was, our great kids, and how much she loved me. It sounded perfect, but I shared that sometimes I worry if I'm doing enough for our happiness. Olivia was very kind and told me she was so grateful for me, saying she often felt very happy. Our talk became lighter, and Olivia playfully reminded me that she traveled all this way just because she loves me. She told me not to worry, saying she was really happy with everything I do. She even complimented me, saying she couldn't ask for a better husband. Then our food arrived, and we kept chatting casually during the meal. After we finished eating and the table was cleared, my phone rang. I said sorry to Olivia and went to the hallway to talk without bothering other people. After a short while, I came back to Olivia, pretending there was an emergency. It was Tommy on the phone telling me I had to go back immediately because of a problem at school. I told Olivia we had to cut our evening short. She looked disappointed, but I couldn't really tell if she meant it. It didn't seem to make much difference to her whether I stayed or went. She seemed to have her own plans. As we were about to leave, a man named Derek Langford, who works with Olivia a lot and travels with her, accidentally came out of the elevator. He seemed surprised to see Olivia and mentioned he had tried to invite her to dinner but got no reply from her room. Then he noticed me, introduced himself as Derek Langford, and said Olivia often mentioned me. I told him I was supposed to stay overnight, but something came up and I had to leave right away. I tried to smile as I shook his hand, making an effort to look okay with everything. While we were in the elevator going up, I gathered my courage to bring up something that was really bothering me. "Olivia, I really think you should think about leaving your job, and if you can, try not to work with Derek anymore," I started. We had talked about this before, and it was a big deal to me, but Olivia was very clear in her response. "Dan, I've already told you, I'm not going to quit my job," she said strongly. "I really enjoy my work, and I've learned a lot from working with Derek. You need to stop worrying for no reason about me and him." I was disappointed. After a quick kiss, Olivia and I went into our room. I packed my stuff to go home, but I couldn't stop thinking about Derek possibly visiting Olivia's room after dinner. By the time I arrived home, I was really upset. I felt angry at my wife because of the hurt she was causing me. I wished I could be clever and find out the truth about whether my wife was cheating, like you hear about some men doing. But I felt like I didn't know how to do anything about it. I couldn't even figure out how to avoid being close with her. I really wanted a divorce, but I didn't have the proof I needed to take such a big step. I felt completely broken when I realized that my wife really might have been unfaithful. I knew what was happening, but I felt like I couldn't do anything about it. Even though I didn't want to accept it, I knew I needed help. 2 days later, Olivia came home looking really happy, which made me even more upset. I couldn't stop thinking about what might be going on. So I decided to look through her bag and found a single contraceptive pill with a hole in it. There was a picnic for the Globe Insurance Company coming up on Saturday, and it was supposed to be fun for the kids, but I was not looking forward to it. I had this feeling that some of my coworkers might know what was going on. I felt embarrassed and tried not to draw attention to myself, worried about becoming the butt of jokes. Maybe I was being too worried, but I couldn't help it. Olivia seemed to really enjoy being at the picnic with everyone, especially Derek. They didn't make it obvious, but they seemed really close. I felt like I was just there, but I acted like everything was fine. Then, a woman named Janet Langford came up to me and asked if I was Dan Roberts. She was incredibly beautiful with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes, and her figure was perfect. I couldn't understand why Derek Langford would cheat on such an attractive woman. Sorry, I was just thinking about something. Anyway, it's nice to meet you. Do you want to go somewhere quiet to talk? Away from all the noise and the kids? She suggested. Maybe we could walk by the lake. No one will notice we're gone. We found a quiet spot to sit, not too far from the picnic. As we sat there looking at the calm lake, she said, I'm ready to talk. What's on your mind? Janet seemed hesitant, like she was about to bring up something sensitive. I wanted to make it easier for her. Are you talking about Derek and my wife's affair? I just found out about it this week, I said. Janet seemed relieved to hear this and opened up. I've known for about 2 months. I'm planning to file for divorce, but I need some help. I've hired a detective to get evidence. I found myself in a situation where I needed more evidence to make my case stronger in court. My lawyer mentioned how useful it would be if Olivia could either testify in court or provide a written statement that was officially recognized by a notary, saying that the affair actually happened. When Janet asked what kind of evidence I had, I told her I had pictures and recorded phone calls, but I was still waiting for some video evidence. The pictures I had were very clear, and I also had specific dates and times for when things happened. I told Janet I was ready to help in any way I could, even though I wasn't exactly sure how to do that. I wondered if her lawyer could use some of the evidence she had to help me with my own divorce paperwork, since I didn't have any solid proof myself. I really needed that assistance. On top of that, I was thinking about taking legal action against Globus, because I had statements showing that some of the higher-ups at the company knew about the affair, but did nothing to stop it. They would have to make a tough decision. Either fire both people involved in the affair, or deal with a lawsuit from me asking for $1 million. I was pretty impressed by how prepared Janet was. She mentioned that Derek was going to play golf the next morning and invited me to come over to her place mid-morning. She said I could stay as late as needed, and she would show me all the evidence she had. Then we could figure out if we had any options. She gave me her address, 206 Hemlock Avenue in Crest, Montana, and made a lighthearted comment that this meeting wasn't a date, but, something important. We laughed a bit, and I felt more comfortable around her. We went back to the picnic without anyone noticing we were gone, and I started to feel a bit more hopeful about sorting everything out. The next morning, as expected, Olivia said she had to go shopping and would be out for a few hours. After dropping off the kids with my mom, I headed to Janet's place. She greeted me at the door and led me to the living room, where there was a comfy leather sofa and a big computer screen showing an empty motel room. Janet asked if I wanted something to drink, offering beer, soda, and wine. I opted for a regular soda, Pepsi if she had it. Sitting down, my curiosity piqued, and I asked Janet to fill me in on what was happening. She mentioned that soon we would see her husband playing golf live on the screen, and she hinted that I might recognize who he was with. I was shocked and asked how she managed to arrange this. Janet explained it cost her $1,014, but it was worth it because Derek would ultimately be the one to pay. She said the live feed would last about 2 hours and suggested we get comfortable, mentioning she had snacks like popcorn and nachos to pass the time. She also mentioned she would get a DVD recording of the whole thing and was willing to share a copy with me. Even though I wasn't exactly looking forward to seeing it, I knew I couldn't miss it. We chatted casually for a while, and then Janet showed me all the evidence she had collected about the affair. I was stunned by the amount of proof she had, including photos, recordings, and documents. Seeing all this made me feel heartbroken because it was clear evidence of Olivia's betrayal. Surprisingly, I also learned that Janet had 3 big koi ponds in her backyard. I told Janet I'd love to see her koi ponds and mentioned maybe bringing my kids over sometime. She was really happy about that and said they should definitely come over. Just then, something started happening on the screen she had set up. True to what Janet had said, Derek and Olivia showed up in the video and started taking off their clothes without any small talk. They went straight to the bed. The video was really clear, but the sound wasn't great. Not that it mattered much, since what we were seeing was enough. It felt really strange sitting there with someone I barely knew, watching my wife with another man. When Janet made a comment about how good my wife looked, I didn't really know how to respond. I just smiled awkwardly, watching everything unfold. I couldn't stay quiet for long, though. I told Janet I didn't think I could keep watching. Do we have to see all this? I asked. It's getting really tough for me. Honestly, seeing my wife like this with someone else was making me feel really uncomfortable. I felt weird that Janet was right there next to me while this was going on, especially since I wasn't getting anything out of it. Plus, since we were recording this for legal reasons, there wasn't really a need for us to watch it all. It all seemed pretty obvious how it was going to go. I suggested maybe we could go see the koi ponds instead. That sounded a lot more interesting than sitting there for 2 hours. Janet looked really excited when I brought up her koi ponds. She quickly agreed, and we went to her backyard. I could hear Olivia's happy sounds from the video as we left, but I was thinking I'd probably enjoy the day more looking at the ponds. Seeing the koi ponds was amazing. I know a bit about plumbing, so I found the whole setup with the pumps and filters really interesting. Derek didn't help Janet with this hobby, so she had to hire people for any work that needed doing. I told her I'd be happy to help out sometime, especially since Derek was often away golfing. I wasn't trying to get closer to Janet in a romantic way. I was genuinely interested in the ponds, but I did enjoy spending time with her. Before we knew it, hours had passed, and it was time for me to head home. The motel room on the screen was empty by then. Janet said she'd let me know next time Derek was golfing so I could bring my kids, Sarah and Shane, over. The next few weeks were tough. I found myself checking Olivia's bag every time she took a shower. She always seemed to have a lot of contraceptives, and I wondered how she managed to use them. I kept a pin with my keys, ready to make holes in them if needed. Then suddenly, Olivia had to go see her sister unexpectedly. After Derek's golf sessions in the evenings, our kids would talk excitedly about their time with this interesting lady they met. Olivia, however, didn't seem too curious about her. The kids would show Olivia their drawings of the fish they saw and talked about the fun names they came up with for each fish. Olivia didn't pick up on the fact that this woman was Derek's wife. She seemed just happy that I found a way to keep the kids busy, which allowed her time to do her own thing. I made 2 attempts to get her to leave her job and stop seeing Derek. Both times she refused, and the second rejection was particularly strong. I also found myself coming up with reasons to avoid being intimate with her. In turn, she would make comments that were critical of my manliness. While those comments hurt, they also made me feel like what I was doing was somehow justified. Then, on a Tuesday night, Olivia made a big announcement. She said she was feeling really stressed out and wanted to take a week off to visit her sister and relax. She asked if I could take care of the kids during that time. I told her I understood she was working a lot, and it seemed like a good idea for her to take a break. Visiting her sister seemed like a much better option than spending a year talking to a therapist. I encouraged her to go and said I would manage things at home. She appreciated my understanding, mentioning all her extra work was for our family, but admitted she might have taken on too much. That night, I had trouble sleeping, worried about all the challenges the next day would bring. Finally, the moment I had been preparing for arrived. Olivia's sister Nancy lived with her husband, Brad, about 3 hours away. Brad was a pretty agreeable guy, always doing what Nancy asked without complaint. In their city, there were 2 clinics known for performing abortions. I made sure to learn the names, addresses, and hours of both places, as well as the conditions for getting an appointment. Both clinics had a rule that required a 2-day waiting period before the procedure could happen. So, the earliest Olivia could get the procedure done would be Friday, assuming she went in for her first appointment on Wednesday. I figured Olivia would want to handle this quickly to have time to recover before coming home. This gave me a day and a half to finalize my plans. The tight timeline didn't hold me back. As soon as Olivia left for her trip, I got to work. Telling my parents about what was happening was tough. I didn't like admitting I was struggling, but they were very supportive. The kids were fine with staying with my parents, and we needed my dad's truck to move Olivia's stuff. My lawyer said all the paperwork would be ready by Thursday morning. Janet had her paperwork ready for Derek, planning to give it to him at the same time I confronted Olivia. The hardest part for me was deciding whether to give Olivia one last chance to make things right. I didn't really think it would change anything. My dad and I spent our time packing Olivia's belongings, keeping busy to not think too much about everything. On Thursday morning, after driving 3 hours, I arrived at the first clinic, only to be disappointed. This left me with only one option: the Family Planning Center. Gathering all my courage, I went there hoping for a better outcome. I walked up to the front desk and greeted the person working there. "Hi, I'm Dan Roberts. My wife Olivia told me I need to come here to fill out a form that shows I agree with what's happening and that I won't sue or anything," I explained. The person at the desk looked a bit confused and asked me what kind of form I was talking about. I admitted I wasn't sure of the exact name, but it was something along those lines. After thinking it over for a moment, she asked, "You're talking about Olivia Roberts, right?" I confirmed that she was correct. Then she asked if I had any documents to provide. She told me it wasn't necessary because Olivia's sister had already signed for her, but having my signature would be better. She then went to look for Olivia's file in their system. Soon she found what she was looking for and said, "Jackpot." She handed me the form, mentioning that it was actually signed by Nancy, Olivia's sister. As I looked over the form, I noticed it said the procedure was set for 11 a.m. on Friday, and I needed to be there an hour early. Curious, I asked if there were any payments I still needed to make. I had my checkbook ready, just in case, but to my relief, I was told Olivia had already paid the full $800 in cash. No more payment was needed. I thanked her for making things easier for me. When I arrived at Nancy and Brad's place, the welcome felt forced and almost funny to me. Olivia acted surprised to see me and asked what brought me there. I told her my parents were watching the kids for a few days, so I took some sick leave to come visit. I mentioned needing a break too. The room went quiet as everyone tried to figure out how to handle the situation. I saw Nancy signal Brad to come to the kitchen with her. Olivia started making small talk. Eventually, Brad came back with a suggestion. He offered to take the next day off and suggested we use his friend Jack's boat to spend the day on the lake, away from everyone else. I thought it was a great idea, and said so, adding that maybe Jack could come too. Brad promised to handle all the preparations. Dinner was quiet, and we all just chatted without touching on any sensitive topics. Olivia was careful not to say anything too intimate since she didn't want Nancy to overhear. The next morning, Jack showed up with the boat. Brad got lunch ready and packed some beer, while we got the truck ready for the boat. As we were getting ready to leave, Brad noticed I wasn't getting into the truck and asked if I wasn't coming. I decided then not to go and suggested Brad should make the most of the day since he probably wouldn't want to be around when Nancy found out what was happening. Brad and I argued for about 5 minutes over whether he should go or not, but in the end, I was pretty firm about it. After getting quite upset and making their feelings known with some choice words and threats, Jack and Brad finally left. Once inside the house, I made myself a cup of coffee. Then, I found Nancy's cell phone, turned it off, and placed a call to my dad using the house phone. Dad's an early riser, so we ended up talking for a good 2 hours. During our talk, the phone kept beeping with call waiting alerts. It was Brad trying to get hold of Nancy, but after about 2 hours of trying, he seemed to give up. With Nancy and Olivia busy in the background, I wrapped up my chat with Dad and prepared myself for what I expected to be a dramatic morning. I cleared the landline's missed call log and turned Nancy's cell phone back on. Olivia and Nancy were planning to visit the family planning center soon, and I was about to have a very uncomfortable encounter with both of them. After finishing off a pot of coffee, I started making a fresh one, this time for Olivia and her sister. Olivia was surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I told her I had decided against going fishing and wanted to spend the day with them instead. I suggested we all go out for lunch, explaining I didn't fancy spending my day on a boat smelling of fish with Brad and Jack. Nancy, however, quickly said they had plans and preferred to go alone. I tried to persuade Olivia, noting that since I'd come all this way, she could at least spend half a day with me. Nancy, meanwhile, made a hasty exit to call Brad, clearly upset. Olivia looked completely overwhelmed, sitting there as if she didn't know what hit her. We could hear Nancy giving Brad a piece of her mind on the phone. Olivia then explained that they'd rather I didn't join them because they had specific plans for the day that didn't include me. I asked for details about their plans, hinting that I found it odd they couldn't spare time for me when I was only there for the day. Olivia assured me they weren't planning to meet guys, but were shopping for personal items and preferred privacy. I offered a compromise, suggesting I could accompany them without intruding on their shopping, especially when trying on intimate items. I promised to find my own distractions and later treat them to lunch as a peace offering. Nancy, standing by the door with a stern expression, seemed finally ready to relent after realizing further persuasion was futile. As they prepared to get ready, Nancy gave me a look that seemed to say, "You don't get it, do you?" Despite her frustration, I couldn't help but smile, thinking about the situation. Later, as they were getting dressed, a light on the landline phone indicated someone was making a call from upstairs. As time ticked away, they had just an hour left to make it to the mall. I was busy thinking about what I should do in case they tried to sneak out without me. I wanted to make sure they were aware I'd be joining them, although I really doubted they'd try to leave me behind. After about 20 minutes, they both came downstairs. Olivia then said, half-jokingly, "All right, Dan, let's head out for some shopping." It turned out to be easier to go along with them than I had thought it might be. The phone call they had upstairs was likely with the family planning center, maybe to change their appointment. Since I had told them I was leaving that evening, they might have figured it was best to wait until after I was gone to deal with their plans. I wasn't trying to stop Olivia from getting an abortion, but I did want to make it a bit more challenging for her. I insisted on taking my car, ensuring they couldn't just leave me somewhere. To drag out the time, I made a stop at a service station not too far from our house. I filled up the gas, checked the oil and water levels, and even cleaned the windshield. More car maintenance than I usually bother with. By the time we reached the mall, both of them were clearly annoyed. I parked the car a bit further away on purpose, so we'd have to walk a bit. Inside the mall, I kept my distance, but made sure I could still see them. I wasn't too interested in what they were buying. It seemed like they weren't really enjoying their shopping trip, just going through the motions and talking to each other to show they were busy. They ended up buying a few things. My aim was to stay out of the way, but still keep an eye on them. It was clear they were aware of the time, especially as the original meeting time at the Family Planning Center passed. I managed to delay their plans, though I knew Olivia would probably go through with it later. I didn't plan to stop her. By midday, we met up in the mall center and decided to have lunch. We ended up at the Olive Garden around 2 p.m. There wasn't much conversation during lunch or on the drive home, but I was quietly amused by the whole situation. They might not like me much, but it didn't bother me. Back at the house, I grabbed a beer and relaxed. When Brad got back, he got an earful from Nancy for about half an hour before sneaking out for a while, only to come back at dinner time. After cleaning up, I asked if I could speak to Olivia alone in the kitchen. Nancy looked at me disdainfully before leaving us alone. Olivia was clearly still upset about how the day went, and it was obvious she wasn't open to changing her mind. With a heavy heart, I made one last plea. Please, Olivia, can you consider quitting your job and cutting ties with Derek Langford? She struggled to keep her anger in check, visibly frustrated. I felt a deep sense of disappointment, realizing that she was not going to change her stance. I'm tired of hearing it, she said. You know my answer. It hasn't changed, and it's not going to. So I suggested we change the topic, or that it might be time for her to leave. I then reached for the envelope I had placed beside the chair and pulled out some official-looking papers. I explained to Olivia that I had repeatedly asked her to reconsider her job and her association with certain people over the last couple of months. Since she consistently refused, I felt I had no choice but to take this step. Olivia, these papers are our divorce documents, I told her. All you need to do is sign them. I've even included a stamped envelope for your convenience, or you can have a lawyer review them first if you prefer. Olivia stared at me, disbelief in her eyes, and then accused me of being foolish and ignorant. She argued that our marriage couldn't be ended simply because she wouldn't quit her job or stop seeing friends I didn't approve of. She claimed that valid reasons were needed for a divorce, which she believed I didn't have. She then suggested I take some time to think things over, reminding me that she was still my wife and had no intention of leaving her home and loved ones just because of my grievances. Ignoring her protests, I reached back into my envelope and laid out a series of photographs on the table. They showed Olivia in compromising situations with Derek. I asked her if she had been intimate with him, adding more photos to the pile as she remained silent. When I placed another set of photos on the table, she began to plead with me to stop. Acknowledging her distress, I paused. Olivia then criticized me for spying on her and accused me of being deceitful and despicable for not confronting the issues directly. She was clearly upset by my actions, but our conversation was interrupted by a call from my dad. After the call, Olivia inquired about it, and I informed her that my father would be dropping off her belongings at Nancy's place soon, as I had changed the locks at our house. I mentioned that if we had overlooked anything while packing her stuff, she should let me know so I could bring it to her. I also told her I had transferred the car into her name and left her with half of our savings, around $1,200, including the bank account details in the envelope. I explained that she would have the right to see our children once a week, but if she could admit to the affair and have it notarized, I would be willing to allow her overnight visits once a month. Lastly, I mentioned that I had a DVD I hadn't shown her yet. It contained footage of her and Derek at the Sandia Motel on May 10th, further proving her infidelity. The video I mentioned to Olivia was 2 hours long and showed everything that was captured in the photos I had laid out on the table. I told her that I hadn't taken any of those photos myself. Honestly, I wasn't interested in what she was doing. My main concern was not to be lied to. I also told her I was giving her these photos as a sort of reminder of our relationship. Then I took a pin from my keychain and placed it on the table in front of her. When she asked what it was, I explained that I had been using this pin to poke small holes in all her contraceptives for the last couple of months. I pointed out that she had used quite a lot of them recently, hinting at her frequent encounters with Derek. Olivia called me despicable for what I had done, but I responded by saying the truly despicable action was having an affair while married. I told her I was sorry, but I needed to leave. As my dad arrived, I couldn't hide my frustration with Olivia. She seemed to show no remorse for her actions, making me feel even more convinced that ending our marriage was the right decision. I mentioned the abortion she had planned for Monday as I was leaving. That's when Olivia started to cry, and Nancy came to comfort her, while Brad tried to talk to me, questioning my decision after 14 years of marriage. Brad offered to help me unload Olivia's belongings from the truck, even though he seemed unsure about the whole situation. Olivia's cries could be heard from inside the house, but I didn't pay much attention to why she was upset. In the weeks that followed, both Olivia and Derek were fired from their jobs at Globe. Despite Olivia's refusal to sign any statements admitting her affair, my lawyer was confident we had a strong case. After that, Olivia didn't reach out to me or attempt to see our children, who surprisingly didn't seem too affected by her absence. They grew closer to Janet, and we all spent a lot of quality time together, carefully avoiding anything that might affect the divorce process. Eventually, our divorce was finalized, and Derek's situation ended poorly for him, losing his house, investments, and being required to make large alimony payments. Just before Christmas, Olivia visited with gifts for the kids. I maintained my calm and didn't let her visit disrupt the holiday spirit. She didn't stay long, and we didn't talk about our past or the divorce. I decided to sell the house, and 2 months later, we moved in with Janet, starting a new chapter in our lives. Derek landed a job in Omaha, and Olivia decided to follow him there. However, not long after, Derek vanished, leaving Olivia without any clue of his whereabouts. When Brad took a job in Alaska, Olivia found herself moving back in with her sister Nancy. It wasn't long before the divorce papers were delivered to Nancy's home, a clear sign that both sisters were seeking comfort in each other during these trying times. Meanwhile, Janet and I enjoyed a peaceful and loving relationship, with her forming a close bond with my children, who warmly returned her affection. We were engaged to be married in June and spent much of our time planning for the honeymoon. The phrase, "we need to have a serious conversation," suddenly echoed in my head, reminding me of the dread many men feel upon hearing it, considering how often those words precede the end of relationships and the shattering of dreams. As I was lost in thought, Lauren, my wife of 14 years, walked into our home, unexpectedly accompanied by a young man. Surprised by her company, I asked about the young man's identity with a mix of curiosity and concern. Lauren seemed nervous as she introduced him as Kevin, the person she needed to discuss with me. Rising from my chair, I observed Lauren, still striking at 36, standing next to Kevin, who appeared no older than 23. The atmosphere was tense, with Lauren looking serious and Kevin, who seemed a bit too self-satisfied, possibly smirking at the situation. I inquired about Kevin's presence, prompting Lauren to admit that our intimate life had been lacking. Her words took me by surprise, and I pleaded with her not to start an argument over it. Yet, Lauren insisted on pointing out the deficiencies in our intimate moments, a statement that bewildered me given her recent avoidance of intimacy. As the conversation unfolded, Kevin attempted to intervene, offering his perspective in a strained voice. I quickly asserted my authority, correcting him to address me formally as Mr. Martin, not Charlie, marking a small victory for me in the exchange. Despite the tension, Lauren attempted to mediate, assuring me of her affection and the impossibility of imagining her life without me, hinting at a deeper issue possibly involving feelings for someone else. Lauren hesitantly admitted that she hadn't fallen in love with someone else, at least not in the traditional sense. She hoped I would be understanding as she explained her feelings. Lauren stressed that her love for me hadn't changed since we got married, but she felt she had grown spiritually in ways I hadn't. She expressed a desire for personal space to explore her own identity. She waited for me to grasp her point, giving me a smile that seemed to ask for my patience and understanding. When she mentioned wanting to find herself, I asked if that meant she wanted the freedom to spend time with Kevin, whom I teasingly referred to as Mickey Boy, to see how he'd react. Despite my provocation, Kevin managed to keep his cool, understanding my jab. Lauren chided me for my choice of words, calling them inappropriate and expecting more understanding from me. I asked her to explain exactly what she meant by needing space for personal growth. She suggested it was about forming a significant connection that would allow her to grow, even if it meant being physically close to someone else while still being committed to me. Lauren seemed frustrated with my difficulty in accepting her explanation, likening me to a child throwing a fit. I apologized, indicating I didn't want to cause her any distress during her journey of self-discovery. She thanked me for my apology, yet it was clear she hadn't fully explained her wishes. I pressed her for a clearer explanation. After some hesitation, Kevin nudged Lauren to speak up, showing his reluctance to refer to me formally. Lauren then shared her idea that we could maintain our marriage while she also went on dates with Kevin a few times a week, assuring me I wouldn't notice any change. I questioned whether she truly believed this arrangement would be beneficial for us. Lauren confidently believed it would work, having discussed and planned it with Kevin. She mentioned she might not be home some evenings but would always return by breakfast, a statement I found ironic since I was the one who usually made breakfast. She believed this arrangement would help her expand her horizons with Kevin's assistance, and supposedly mine too. I summarized her proposal sarcastically, highlighting the lack of intimacy between us over the past weeks and how this would essentially allow Kevin to be with her several times a week. Lauren appeared distressed by my summary, while Kevin visibly struggled to control his frustration. Lauren pleaded for me to stop being difficult, caught between her plan and my reaction. Lauren reached out to me, hoping for a reconciliation, but I stopped her with a gesture and turned my attention to her younger companion, Kevin. I challenged him, asking if he was comfortable with the idea of Lauren being intimate with me on occasion. Kevin responded with a confident smile, thinking they had the upper hand, and arrogantly suggested that Lauren would not enjoy intimacy with me as much as with him. Lauren attempted to silence Kevin's brash comments, but he continued to boast about his superiority, suggesting that after being with him, I would be inadequate. I questioned Lauren directly, asking if she believed Kevin's claims about his superiority and ability to please her more effectively. Lauren immediately refuted these claims, insisting she had never made such comparisons and criticized Kevin's performance as merely different, not necessarily better. After allowing them a moment to reflect, I introduced the topic of Rachel, which caught them both off guard. Kevin reacted with anger, threatening me physically, but I calmly informed him that his wife, Rachel, was already involved in our situation. Lauren tried to calm Kevin down, urging him not to escalate the situation further. Despite Kevin's youth and fitness, I was confident in my ability to handle confrontations, thanks to my experience in the construction industry. Kevin hesitated to act on his threats, while Lauren questioned why I brought Rachel into the conversation. I explained that Rachel had reached out to me a month ago to disclose the truth about Lauren and Kevin's affair. Both Lauren and Kevin were taken aback by this revelation, with Kevin being particularly shocked as he was unaware of Rachel's involvement. The tension in the room was palpable as we each waited for someone to break the silence. Finally, Lauren couldn't hold back her questions any longer. She asked me if I had been intimate with Rachel, seeking confirmation. I revealed that my meetings with Rachel, initially motivated by revenge, had evolved into something more meaningful over the past 4 weeks, much to Lauren and Kevin's astonishment. Lauren called me a liar in disbelief. Kevin jumped in, calling me despicable and insisting that his wife Rachel would never be unfaithful, especially not with someone older. I raised an eyebrow, looking at Lauren, who was visibly upset by the accusation. Kevin's comment about age struck me as ironic since Lauren and I were close in age, making me wonder what he thought of her. I decided to challenge Kevin, asking if he needed proof of my claim. I teased him about describing Rachel's unique tattoo or mimicking her reactions, which visibly shook both of them. Kevin's certainty wavered as it dawned on him that I knew intimate details about Rachel. He accused me of lying again, unable to believe Rachel would be involved with me. I continued to tease him, suggesting that if he had explored more with Rachel, she might not have sought me out. In a fit of anger, Kevin stormed off, declaring his intention to leave, a move he thought would assert his dominance. I called after him, hinting that he wouldn't be able to enter his house without the key I held, revealing that the locks had been changed. Kevin's frustration peaked when he realized he didn't have access to the new key, undermining his confidence further. As I announced my departure, Lauren became distraught, questioning what would become of her belongings. I assured her calmly that I had already taken what I needed and that she could keep the house and the car, leaving her to deal with the rest through my lawyer. Lauren's despair grew as she contemplated how she would manage without me, especially with her part-time job and the likelihood of Kevin losing his employment due to actions I had set in motion. As I left the house, the dynamic between Lauren, Kevin, and myself had drastically changed from just half an hour earlier. I thanked Kevin sarcastically for the encounter and bid Lauren a similar farewell, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Without a backward glance, I walked to my car, closing this chapter of my life. As I walked away, the sound of their arguments and loud cries followed me. I was well aware that ending things with Lauren wouldn't come cheap, potentially costing me around $100,000. But this wasn't the first time Lauren had betrayed me, and any feelings I once had for her had completely disappeared. The thought of swapping a well-maintained 36-year-old, despite its excellent condition, along with a hefty sum of money, for a fresh 21-year-old model that hadn't seen much use, struck me as a favorable trade. The fact that this young woman had developed feelings for me, and that she came with the added bonus of having a wealthy father, only made the situation seem more advantageous and somewhat amusing.